I'm excited to welcome you to today's presentation, and thanks to CAFCN for inviting myself to present. My name is Jennifer Winter. I am the owner of Pedicare Professional Footcare Instruments Limited. Some of you may be aware of us, some of you may not. We've been to a number of CAFCN in-person conferences in the past. Obviously, this year is a little bit different with COVID, so really excited that the organizers were able to put together a virtual conference for everyone, allowing people to attend this from the comfort of their home, just like I am currently in the comfort of my home office, since I can't be in our office space to record this, since we're in the busy throes of our normal work day right now. So this is a pre-recorded presentation. I am not live on the screen right now. This is being recorded in advance. So to give you a little bit of background in case you're not familiar with Pedicare, I'll go through a little bit of that first, and then we'll hop into the presentation today about considerations for the selection of single-use versus reusable instruments. So Pedicare has been around since 2006, and we supply instruments, equipment, and supplies to foot care professionals all across North America, with a concentration in Canada. And what you may not know is we recently, in February, acquired the Rototool division of products, which includes vacuum integrated units such as the Rototool Essential, the Rototool Deluxe, a full offering of diamond carbide and ceramic burrs, as well as rechargeable rotary tools and abrasive caps. So Pedicare is now the home of that brand. We have other distributors that distribute the products for us across Canada and the US, but Pedicare is now the home of the Rototool brand. So we're really excited about that. But today we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about single-use instruments versus reusable instruments. And the CFCN organizers thought that this was a topic that was a good one to cover during the conference, since there's been a lot more interest in single-use instruments since COVID came along. And the reason for that, obviously, is that ability to provide sterile to the point of care with each and every client. And so one of the questions that comes up frequently is, well, aren't single-use instruments really expensive compared to autoclaving? And so that's what this presentation is about. I'm going to dig into the single-use line for you and compare it to reusable instruments and the process or reprocessing of those instruments and the cost associated with that versus the costs associated with using single-use instruments. So without further ado, I will jump into this presentation here. It's probably about a half an hour or so presentation. Because it is pre-recorded, we can't do sort of a live Q&A, but what will happen is there will be the ability to enter chat questions, and I will be on the presentation live, able to answer chat questions that come in throughout the presentation as well as at the end of the presentation. So we'll just pop into these slides here. So let's start with, and just to do a disclaimer as well, Pedicare carries the Susol single-use line of instruments. They're from a company in the UK called Bailey Instruments. This is their single-use line. We've been carrying this line for a number of years. It's very well regarded. The instruments are of high quality, and we'll get into details about the line. But I also want to say we also carry autoclaves and reprocessing supplies. So in terms of conflict of interest, we carry both. So this presentation is not biased in one direction or the other. The intention is simply to provide information about the single-use instruments and how they compare price-wise to reprocessing reusable instruments. So to start with, what are single-use instruments? If you've not already worked with any of the single-use lines or the Susol single-use line in particular, what they are sterile packed instruments. So I have some here. I'm not sure how much detail you'll be able to see on your screen, but for example, this is a blocks file that's packed individually. And so this is a sterile package. All of the single-use instruments come sterile packed, whether it's an individual instrument such as this one, or there are also kits with multiple instruments that come sterile packed together. They are intended as one-time use. So the manufacturer's intended use is for that instrument, such as this blocks file, to be used once and then disposed of, because then it's not sterile afterwards. So if you're obviously intending to be sterile to the point of care with every client, then this black file is used once and that's it. So that is the intention. There are, my understanding, speaking with some nurses, is that there are some instances where you can use an instrument multiple times on the same client, but I'm not speaking to that today. Today we're talking about these instruments as one-time single use. The Susol line in particular has quite a wide selection of instruments. So they have multiple styles of nippers, they have individual blacks files, probes, they have a selection of diamond burrs. So there's quite a bit of selection within the line. So that allows you to be able to treat a wide variety of clients with this single-use option. Manufactured to a very high standard. So these instruments, you're not giving up quality in order to work with a single-use instrument. Where the manufacturers have been able to create efficiency and cost effectiveness is by using different types of materials. So possibly a lower grade of stainless steel, other types of metals that allow them to produce these instruments for less cost, therefore making the single-use instruments less expensive than reusable instruments. They're also lighter as a result. So that's a really neat feature of the single-use instruments as well. But like I said, you're not sacrificing quality. And the beauty, for example, say with a pair of single-use nippers, is that every nipper is sharp. So you're opening up a fresh pair each time. You're not going to run into an issue where you're going to have dull nippers because every single pair is a fresh pair. So that's a really nice feature. Precision, function, and clinical quality. So like I said, you're not sacrificing quality in order to work with the single-use line. So you're seeing every instrument you're working with is of a quality that is similar to a reusable instrument, just manufactured in a different way. And so within each of these pouches, what you have, so some of the kits in particular come with stickers that can be used for charting purposes, but every single pouch down from a little tiny burr, which I'll show you, so a little tiny burr pouch to a black file or a pair of nippers, they all are marked with a lot number, an expiry date, and manufacturing production date. So it gives you all of that information on here so that you can chart and mark that coding down on your client's chart. And then, as I said, with the kits, there's actually stickers that allow for easy charting as well. So that gives just a really quick overview of what single-use instruments are. What are the benefits of using single-use instruments? I mean, there's the obvious of it being sterile to the point of care every time just by picking up a package, opening it up, and you're ready to work. So there's that ease and convenience of being with the client, knowing you need to use a pair of nippers, grabbing it, opening the pouch, and you're ready to go. And obviously the fact that you're not having to reprocess that pair of nippers, those blocks files at the end of the session with your client. So that is certainly ease and effectiveness, ease and efficiency that you get with working with the single-use instruments. As I said, guaranteed sterile to the point of care. So every single pouch is sterile packed. So you're guaranteed that with every single single-use instrument. So another benefit, obviously no reprocessing time. So you're not having to reprocess these instruments. You're needing to dispose of them, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you're not having to reprocess them. You're not cleaning them. You're not pouching them for autoclaving. You're not having to spend that time at the end of your workday in order to reprocess these instruments. So certainly in terms of a time saving for yourself personally, that can be huge depending on the size of your practice. Reliability of instruments for every single treatment. Again, I've said this already a couple of times, but every single instrument you open is a new instrument. So those nippers are sharp. The blacks files we don't want them necessarily to be sharp, but they're of a new quality each time you open a pack. Your diamond burrs are new each time versus, obviously over time those diamond burrs wear down. But each and every time you're going to open a single-use burr, you're going to have a new, fresh, diamond-coated burr there. And then they're lighter than traditional reusable instruments. So in terms of wear on your wrists and hands, over time, working with lighter instruments can help with that. And certainly some practitioners have a preference for working with lighter nippers. So that's something that's a feature you're going to get with this product line. Simply, I'll give you, and this is not intended to be a promo for Susol single use. Obviously, it is in a sense, but the idea again is just to provide information about the line so that you can make educated decisions about what works best in your practice. And again, that's what it always boils down to. There's always going to be reusable instruments. There's always going to be single use instruments, and it's about deciding what works best within your practice. And again, one of the goals of this presentation is to provide you with the information to decide within your practice, are single-use instruments appropriate? Are they a good option for you within your practice based on the number of clients you see, the types of clients you're seeing? And so there's different factors that can be taken into consideration when you're trying to make a decision on that. So there's the company Bailey Instruments has created some great demo promo videos just to kind of highlight the features and benefits of the line. So I'm just going to play a couple of those for you now. And so this one here is just an overview of the Susol single-use line.
Susol podiatry sets provide a convenient and flexible way to carry out foot care, both in the clinic and in domiciliary environments. We have used compact packaging to ensure for easy storage and transport. Each set is individually wrapped, sterile and ready to use. The handy tabs on the boxes make for easy opening and access. We have 4 sets available covering different clinical needs, from essential foot care to foot surgery.
And then I'm going to show one other video that shows you the 3-piece nail kit. And I'll show you in a minute the different types of options available within the Susol single-use line. The 3-piece nail kit is definitely the most popular, that and the nippers on their own. Those are the 2 most popular options within the Susol line. So within the Susol nail care set, the 3-piece, and the video will go into this, but you're getting the nipper, the black file, and the emery board all in one sterile packed pouch. So that is a convenient option for a lot of practices. So I'll just play this video and you can see what the contents are for that particular set.
The Susol nail care set contains a general curved nipper, an emery board and a black spile. Each set is individually wrapped, sterile and ready to use. The unique silicone grip handles of the nipper help absorb the shock caused by nail cutting, which reduces the strain on the hand and the wrist. They also feel more comfortable to hold in the hand. The cutting edge has been honed for sharpness, which gives an easier, more reliable cut. The concealed spring has been designed to reduce failures commonly caused by misaligned external springs. The emery board is made from reinforced wood fibre for durability, with 2 grades of cut, a medium and a fine. The black spile is manufactured from high-grade medical steel with precision-engineered teeth for quality and consistent filing.
And so that there, as I said, is the 3-piece set. But there's a lot of other options within the Susol product line. That is just one example of a kit, and that's this one over here as the 3-piece kit. But you can also get individual black files, individual probes. There's an ingrow nipper, your standard nipper, as well as a selection of burrs. They're all diamond burrs, and then this gives it even a little bit more. So you also have a thwaite that you can access. There's various scissors. So at Pedicare, we have access to this full line of instruments, but we don't necessarily carry everything in stock, but we can access the full product line. We do carry the most popular options, such as the nippers, the different kits, the burrs, the black files, probes, etc. So those are products, as well as these foot dressers here. Those are products that we always have in stock. So there's a lot of options there for you. Does it meet every need? Not necessarily, but it meets most needs within most practices, and that's the goal that they're going for. And so, for example, with the burrs, they're all diamond burrs. There's 7 different styles to choose from, but there's no carbide burrs. So if you're working with carbide burrs, ceramic burrs, at the moment, there are no single-use options for that. That's something that may come in the future, but at the moment you have access to this line of diamond burrs. So who should use single-use instruments? And so from my perspective, I think every practice, there's a place for them. Does that mean your whole practice is single-use instruments? Definitely not. There certainly are practices, even high-volume podiatry clinics. We have a number of clients that have gone full single-use. That's all they use. And they've made that decision just to create efficiency within their practice. That being said, on the sort of the other side of the spectrum is a lot of our customers choose just to keep a small inventory, say a box of 10 of nippers or of the three-piece kits, just so they have them as a backup. Let's say the autoclave breaks down, or you have an issue where you open up a pack of instruments that you've run through the autoclave and your nippers are broken, or there's some sort of issues. You have them as a backup. So when I say everyone should use single-use instruments, I don't mean that everyone should make their entire practice single-use instruments, just that there's an application within pretty much every practice to use single-use instruments, even if it is just as a backup option. It provides a lot of flexibility and means that you always have instruments at the ready that you can use in any situation that you might run into. So the most common applications for using single-use instruments are, so for example, with new foot care nurses, oftentimes they're coming out of training. Maybe there's some people on this presentation that are new foot care nurses and just getting started. They don't want to necessarily invest in an autoclave. It's quite an undertaking, quite an expense. And of course, as you'll see as we go through this presentation, it's not just about the autoclave. There's so many other components to autoclave reprocessing that need to be factored in, as many of you also know. So for a new foot care nurse, it is a great option in terms of you're only investing in the tools that you need to start your practice, and then over time you could grow into reusable instruments depending on how quickly your practice grows. So that's a really great application. We see that quite frequently with new foot care nurses. Nurses nearing retirement, so some nurses that are nearing retirement and maybe earlier in their practice, autoclaving wasn't considered to be necessary. And so they're near the end of their practice and they want to continue practicing and meet best practice standards and provide sterile to the point of care, but they don't want to invest in an autoclave. So again, that's where the single-use line becomes a great option. Busy foot care practices looking to create efficiency. So whether it's foot care nurse or podiatry clinic, a health center that provides foot care, those busy practices, sometimes they don't want to deal with the reprocessing time involved. And as I've said, some of them have gone to straight single use. It's not common, but it does happen, and I'm seeing more of it over time. And so again, it's just about creating that efficiency within the practice. Working in remote areas. So if you're a foot care nurse that works in remote areas, you don't have access to an autoclave. Again, single-use instruments provide a great option there. Working with high-risk clients, maybe it's a choice to not reuse those instruments depending on the nature of the issue with that client. Again, knowing that those are a pair of instruments you're going to use and dispose of after the fact and not reprocess. And then, as I said earlier, as a backup, so the autoclave breaks down, you have an instrument failure of some kind, you've got some single-use instruments at the ready that you keep with your other supplies, and that way you always have access to sterile instruments regardless of the situation. So the big question, how much do they cost? So how much do single-use instruments cost? So they vary in price depending on if you're buying individual instruments or if you're buying them in a kit format. So there's lots of different options available. And what we offer, so you can buy the instruments individually. So you could buy a single burr, you could buy a single pair of nippers. Or you can buy them in boxes of 10 or cases of 100. And so boxes of 10 receive a 10% discount, cases of 100 receive a 15% discount. So if you're using single-use instruments heavily in your practice, there is a cost benefit to buying them by the case. So for example, with the general nippers, and so that's this one here, it's a 13 centimeter nipper. The individual price is $7.19 each. That price goes down if you're buying in a higher quantity, so it's important to keep that in mind. Sorry, correction. These prices are based on a 10-pack. So a 10-pack box such as this of kits, you're getting a 10% discount. So the kits range from $10.40 to $12.40. Nippers are around $7 a pair. There's ingrown nippers that are a little more expensive, and then same thing with weights. And then you've got the individual black spiles, probes, and elevators that are coming at about just below $3 a pair. Same with the burrs. The burrs are about $3.25 each, but bought in boxes of 100, you're getting 15% off that price. So it just gives you an idea of if you're thinking about a per client cost. So for example, with a client, let's say you wanted to use the 3-piece kit that came with the nipper, black spile, and emery board, you'd be looking at about $12.50 per pack. So it just gives you an idea of what your instrument cost would be for that client if you're going to use single-use instruments. And so we'll start to get, so this is kind of the meat of the presentation. So you might be questioning, okay, well, how does that compare to autoclaving? Because you know, what are the real costs associated with using single-use instruments versus using the autoclave? And it can be tricky to come up with that comparison. We've spent a lot of time, and this is a cost comparison that I have tweaked and changed and modified and have been working on for several years. And it changes all the time depending on the cost of various supplies, the cost of autoclaves. So this is my best estimation of showing kind of a side-by-side real life as possible comparison between pricing and costs for reusable versus single-use instruments. So of course you've got your autoclave here, and that's just one expense. So we get approached a lot about, I want to buy an autoclave, what's the cost? And you know, we'll provide that costing, and then whenever we send out costing, we also provide a list of the other supplies you're going to need for autoclave reprocessing, and oftentimes those costs are not being factored in to what the real costs of reprocessing actually are. So you've got your autoclave, but you also have other cost considerations, such as, do you have to remodel your space in order to have an autoclave? Are there other accessories that you need to buy with your unit, such as a pouch rack or something like that, in order to be able to reprocess effectively? You've got servicing and maintenance on your autoclave. You've got the cost of your reusable instruments. So as much as, yes, there's a cost for single use, you've also outlaid funds for your reusable instruments that need to be replaced on a, you know, every 3 to 5 year basis, depending on the instrument. You've got instrument cleaning supplies, so whether it's your detergents, your ultrasonic cleaning solutions, if you're doing stain removal, if you're doing like an immersive lubricant, something like that. So there's all variety of cleaning supplies related to the reusable instruments. You've got your utilities, so your electricity and water for running your autoclave. You might also have an ultrasonic cleaning unit. So there's the outlay, of course, for the unit itself, but then also for the ultrasonic cleaning detergent to go in it. You've got pouches, so various sizes of pouches for burrs, for nippers, for black spiles, and then your testing. So you've got biological monitoring, your incubator, your ampules, your test strips, your class 5 test strips. So those are all costs that go into reprocessing. And the one that always gets left out, the cost that always gets left out of comparisons is your time. And your time is worth something. And I think it's really important when you're looking at a cost comparison to factor that in, you know, whether it's, you know, if you're really efficient, or maybe you have someone else reprocessing for you. So then sometimes it's not your time, but there is still a cost to that. So what I'm going to show you on the next slide is going to have a lot of content. There's a lot of numbers, and it's going to be small, so I'll just kind of walk through it. But the idea is to provide as real as possible a cost comparison between the two. So on this slide here, we're looking at the cost of reusable versus single-use instruments, and there's a number of assumptions built into this comparison. So one of the assumptions is that it's based on 20 clients per week. So a practice that's seeing 20 clients per week, 50 weeks a year. So you're taking 2 weeks of vacation, which might not be enough for some of you. But just for the sake of providing an example, this is a 20 client a week practice, practicing 50 weeks a year. And this is over 5 years. So that's 5,000 client visits. And so that's the scenario that we've created. And then on the single-use side, it's the assumption built in is that you're using single-use kits that are bought in cases of 100. So there's a cost savings there of purchasing by the case. So So there's obviously in some way, the cost, the reflective cost for the single use might be a little bit lower, depending on, but it's based on kits. So in some instances, you might just need the nipper, and that would be less expensive than using a kit. So I think as it averages out, the cost that we've assumed for the single use instruments is quite accurate. So one thing you see, and I mean, as you're putting together lists, you know, on the reusable side, there's a lot of different things to consider. There's a lot of different costs over here, and those are all things you have to track, purchase, resupply, use, etc. So there's a lot happening on the reusable side. Obviously, over time, you get into a rhythm with autoclave reprocessing, and it becomes time effective. So the idea that we're looking at here is when does it become cost effective? So types of things that we've included here, and these are all based on estimates and current values and costs for products and equipment. So for the first item, we've got the actual autoclave itself. So at the moment, an autoclave with a pouch rack, a Tuttenauer Easy 9 Plus, for example, is coming in at about $65.90. And so again, we're thinking about the useful life of the unit. So units, you know, a useful life of a unit, an autoclave unit, is about 10 years. In this case, our scenario is 5 years. So, you know, you're outlaying those funds. You could possibly sell your unit at the end for, if you sold it after 5 years, there'd still be value in that unit. But for argument's sake, for this cost comparison, we've got it in at the full value. You've got a setup cost of potentially reconfiguring your space to be able to autoclave reprocess. Maybe you need to add a sink. Maybe you need to add some walls. Maybe you need to reconfigure your basement in order to have an autoclave setup that meets the standards. And so I've factored in $1,500 for those setup costs. Reusable instruments, so you're buying instruments to reprocess. So in this case, we're looking at a 3-piece set. A nipper, blacks file, and maybe an ingrow scissor or some other instrument to make up that 3-piece set. And we're saying that you're replacing those 3 times over the course of 5 years. Again, that could be an overestimate, but it's coming in at just under $3,000 for those instruments over a 5-year period. You've got biological monitoring, so that's the kit that you're purchasing, and then you're buying replacement ampules over that 5-year period. So we're assuming you're running 5 loads a week over a 50-week period, and so that's the cost of your ampules over that 5-year period. Your class 5 test strips, your ultrasonic unit if you're using one, and then the detergents for cleaning and the ultrasonic, and then the autoclave cleaning products such as a chamber bright. So again, sort of the maintenance type products you need to use to keep your autoclave healthy and working properly, and then pouches. We've got repairs and servicing. So over a 5-year period, there might be various things that you need to have serviced with your autoclave, so factoring that in. And then utilities, so your water, your electric for running the autoclave. So taking all of those and that's a long list. It takes a long time for me to say it. But that's, you know, it's a pretty lengthy list of items. So we come up, when we have run this scenario, we come up with sort of a cost over 5 years of about just shy of $20,000 to run an autoclave for 5 years, including the cost of the autoclave. But what's not factored into that is your time. So over a 5-year period, you could spend around 1,250 hours of your time reprocessing. Again, this is based on running 5 loads per week. And, you know, say we're billing out your time at $30 an hour. That would be $37,500 of build time on your part. So if you factor all of that together, you're looking at a total cost over 5 years of about $57,000. Again, there's, you know, someone could in the chat say, well, I don't use an ultrasonic, or my autoclave was less expensive, I bought it used. I don't, you know, I do something different than this scenario. This is simply a scenario we've put together and tried as best as possible to include as many of the possible expenses and to try to estimate those expenses as accurately as we can. So your scenario might be slightly different. So you may come in over this number, you may come in under this number. The point is not that it's going to be exact, it's just simply to show a comparison. So on the comparison side with single-use instruments, if you're purchasing 5,000 units of single-use instruments over the course of the 5 years, you'd be looking in and around $48,000 to $50,000 over that time frame. And so that could include, again, these are based on buying kits, but your cost could be lower if you mostly only use nippers, or if you're using more individual instruments and not so many of the kits. But again, it's an approximation. So in and around $50,000 for the single-use instruments over that time. And so if you look at that and you average that out over 5,000 clients that you're seeing over 5 years, your per client cost over a 5-year period for reprocessing reusable instruments comes in at around $11.48 per client, and single use comes in at $9.78 per client. So that's a cost savings of $1.45 over 5 years. So you're looking at a cost savings of about $8,500. So really the main message I want to get out of this slide, which I don't even know if you can see all the details depending on how this is showing up on your screen. The main point we're getting at is that at about 20 clients per week, that's where the tipping point happens. So in this scenario, it's a cost savings and a fairly significant one over 5 years. But as I said, your numbers might be a bit different on the autoclave side. What we have found is that about 20 clients a week is that tipping point. Under 20 clients a week, single-use instruments are more cost effective. Once you reach that sort of tipping point of 20 clients or more, then that is a good time to start looking for an autoclave and integrating that into your practice. Then it makes more sense. It's more cost effective. Simply cost is more effective once you're at that 20 clients or more per week. Then that makes financial sense to invest in that autoclave. Obviously, there's a lot of foot care nurses who decide at the very beginning, I definitely want an autoclave. I'm going to go straight into that. I want more variety of instruments, and so I want to have access to an autoclave so I can use all the instruments that I want to. And so these are the different considerations that we're going to talk about after this screen. So as I said, the main message coming out of this is that there is a cost effectiveness of single-use instruments up to about 20 clients per week. After that point, it's a personal decision. You might have a client base where you're seeing 30 clients a week, but you decide you want to still use single-use instruments. That is your prerogative. So it basically boils down to choice. And so what are some other considerations? Because the cost is just one. There's other things to be considered. So while there's lots of benefits to working with single-use instruments, they may not be right for your practice, depending on the types of instruments you're using on a day-to-day basis. So for example, if you are a practice where you use a wider selection of nippers and instruments that is currently available in the Susol single-use line, then the single-use instruments, I wouldn't recommend in that case going full single-use. Again, you might still want them as a backup, but if you're used to using 3 different types of nippers and you really like these cantilever ones, or a double action nipper or a different style of nipper than is currently available in the single-use line, you likely don't want to go full single-use in that scenario. Similarly, we're obviously a company that sells a lot of burrs, and are definitely proponents of working with a selection of burrs within your practice. If you're using a lot of carbide burrs in your practice, ceramic burrs, a wide selection of diamond burrs, again, you're going to be disappointed by just having access to 7 different diamond burrs in that scenario. However, again, a great option as a backup if you're looking to have some backup burrs in your quiver of instruments and supplies. So again, if you're using a lot of different burrs, then going full single use is probably not right for you. If you have a really large client base and you're seeing more than 20 clients per week, like I said on the previous slide, that's kind of that tipping point that we see. More, as you start approaching, 15, 20 clients a week, then moving over to reusable instruments and autoclave reprocessing makes more financial sense. You already own an autoclave and you have an efficient reprocessing system. So regardless of the size of your practice, if you already have an autoclave, chances are you're not going to move into changing your practice over to being full single use. But you may decide that you want to have some single use nippers or single use kits on hand just as a backup to have at the ready. I also wanted to review some frequently asked questions related to single use. As I said earlier in the presentation, we've been carrying the Susol single-use line for quite a period of time, for several years, and the line has grown in popularity over that time. With definitely over the past year with COVID, there's been sort of a rapid increase in demand for the products, and so as such, there's been a lot of questions related to the product line. One of them being, how do I dispose of these instruments? So you're gonna, if you're using single use, you've got these nippers, you've got the burrs, the blacks files, they start to accumulate, you've got them stored probably in a bin of some type. What are you going to do with these instruments? Most of our clients that work with single use have made contact with a local metal recycler in their area, and can have these instruments recycled by a local metal recycler. Typically, as a result of the types of metals that are used, my understanding is you cannot get, there's no money coming back to you to recycle, but just knowing that you can get the instruments recycled versus just putting them, just disposing them in the trash or at some other disposal method. So again, you'd be looking to contact a local metal recycler if you're working with single-use instruments. And then the second question we get often is, what's the shelf life of each pouch? So you've got these sterile packed instruments. It is a requirement by the manufacturer to list an expiry date on each pouch, even though obviously as of that expiry date, the instruments don't automatically become non-sterile. They're still sterile even after the expiry date. However, each pouch is marked with an expiry date clearly on it. And typically when you're purchasing from Pedicare, those instruments come to you typically with a 12 to 24 month shelf life on them. There might be exceptions to that. There might be times you get them when they have a 3 to 6 month, but generally speaking, you're getting an instrument that has a 12 to 24 month shelf life. And as I said, each pouch and instrument, even down to the tiny burrs, is marked with a clear expiry date. And so what about pricing in terms of volume discounts and that? And as I talked about earlier, there are volume discounts automatically worked in. You don't need to ask for those discounts. You get them automatically if you're purchasing them from our website or you're purchasing via another method such as email or phone. If you buy a box of 10, which looks like this, you're getting 10% off of that box of 10 compared to buying them individually. And then if you're buying them by the case of 100, then you're getting automatically 15% off. So there is benefit to purchasing in higher quantities that make sense for your practice. And that leads into the next question of, how many kits should I have on hand at any given time? So what selection of instruments? If you're going full single use, then you'd want to look at how many clients might you see over a 3 to 6 month period, and then buy instruments in that quantity. That allows you to have enough on hand and take advantage of volume discounts by buying that higher quantity as opposed to just individual instruments on a more frequent basis. It's much more cost effective to project out and see how many clients you might see over a 3 to 6 month period and buy instruments for that time frame. And that way you're buying them either by the box of 10 or buying them in the case of 100. That being said, you can always top up. So you can always contact us and request just a few pairs of nippers if you need them to top up your supply. That's not an issue. We also get asked, does Pedicare offer samples? We do. You can definitely reach out to us. If you have never worked with a single-use instrument or the Susol single-use line before, we would be happy to set you up with a complimentary pair of their nippers. Or if you're more interested in the burrs, we could certainly send you a complimentary burr as well to try out. Because that's one of the concerns is, how are these nippers going to compare to what I've been working with? And so it's good to get them in your hands and be able to try them out. So certainly if you're new to single use and you're interested in trialing the line, you can certainly reach out to us and we'd be happy to set you up with some instruments to trial. So that's the meat of the presentation, and so overall the message, sort of drawing conclusion, is just to make sure that when you're making decisions about your instruments, or if you're considering single-use instruments, that you're factoring all of the costs in when you're trying to decide which option works best for your practice, and that there isn't just one clear answer. You have to look at a variety of things. You need to look at the number of clients you're going to be seeing, the types of clients you're going to be seeing, the types of instruments that you want to work with, what stage of practice you're in order to determine what works best within your practice. So as mentioned earlier, the single-use line has applications in pretty much every practice, whether it's just having it as a backup or using it as your primary instrument supply. But it's good to know that you have access to that line that you can tap into at any point. So if you have any questions, we're always here to answer your questions and provide more information. You can contact us. You can see our website at www.pedicare.ca. You can visit there. The full line of Susol single-use instruments is available on the website, as well as reusable instruments, autoclaves, and reprocessing supplies. And that way you can go in and check out the costs there as well. You're welcome to obviously email or phone us as well and have a conversation about what might work best in your practice. And that concludes the presentation. Now, that being said, as I said, this is pre-recorded, but I will be available during the scheduled session to answer questions via chat. So any questions that come in, I believe this presentation is happening on Friday. I don't recall the specific time, but any questions that come in via chat, I will be available to answer those right away. And then you can, of course, going back to the previous slide, you can take a picture of this, reach out to us after the fact. We're always happy to answer your questions. And thank you for joining me on this. And I look forward to seeing you in person at future conferences. It's certainly my preferred means of presenting and being able to answer questions right on the spot, but we work with what we've got right now with COVID, and the beauty of this is that more people can hopefully join in on these presentations since they don't need to travel to attend, and can gain knowledge from all of the different presenters that have made themselves available online. And so a big thanks to CFCN for hosting this, and I look forward to speaking with you all soon. Take care.